This is a story of how humanity and technology meet that has multiple facets. Munjed will share his experiences and some extraordinary images before a Q&A session in the last 15-20 minutes of this hour. Please welcome Associate Professor Munjed al Muderis.
Thank you very much, Meri. Thank you very much, everybody, for having me here, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. It's really an honor to be presenting in front of you all. Normally, I give talks without PowerPoint, but because it involves some technology, so I made a PowerPoint presentation or a keynote. I was born in Baghdad. This is my father, and that's myself in that pram. And you can see Iraq was not that bad. We did have rocky things, and believe me, Baghdad was a beautiful city. That is a picture I was taking in the 70s about Iraq and Baghdad. We did also have fireworks. They were pretty much similar to Sydney fireworks, except they were real planes being shot by real missiles. So I grew up normally, as you can describe it, in a war-torn country. However, I watched The Terminator at the age of 12, and ironically, I didn't understand the movie, obviously, because the whole idea about the Terminator is not to make Terminators, but I had this passion about making half machine, half human. So that's why I pursued my dream to go to medical school, and I managed to do that. And I graduated as a doctor, and I was very happy. I never thought about leaving Iraq, and I was very similar to millions of Syrians when I visited Damascus in 1996. Syrians were very happy in their country, and look at them now. There are 10 million of them outside. A lot of them are refugees in Iraq, sadly. So that moment that changed my life is when I refused to do this. Saddam Hussein ordered us to amputate army deserters' ears, and so I couldn't do that. And as a result of that, I had to flee outside Iraq. Funny enough, one of my colleagues asked a friend of mine if that's true, that Saddam did that to people. So I felt very insulted, actually. And I'll send him this picture. So I ended up coming to Australia on a boat. The journey was very rough, and eventually I got to Australia as a new arrival, and that was my home for several months in Curtin Detention Centre. And the first thing happened to me in Detention Centre was changed my name to 982. And I was marked with a permanent marker on my shoulder with that number. And I was a naughty person, and I caused a lot of trouble to the Department of Immigration. So as a result of that, I visited many Australian prisons. And let me tell you, Western Australian jail system is fantastic. It was absolutely nice. But I had access to a phone, so the Department of Immigration didn't like that, so they put me back in the detention center, this time in this box. It's called the Suicide Watch Box, and I spent many days there. But eventually, I was released, and fast forward moving to that life. And my life changed upside down, and I became a celebrity. All of a sudden, I get invited by Her Majesty the Queen to visit her in Windsor Castle, and Prince Harry didn't even bother seeing Tony Abbott with his big ears, and he came to see me in Macquarie University. And that's all because of what we developed, which is a technology that is called osseointegration. And I do apologize if some pictures will look a bit confronting. So the technology is very simple, if you think about it. It's basically making a cut on the leg and inserting a titanium rod inside the bone, rejigging the muscles and nerves to operate a robotic prosthesis. It is an idea that basically developed many, many years ago. This is a mandible of a Mayan person from Honduras, and the three front teeth, as you can see, they're made out of ivory, and people thought that it was a ritual to make dead bodies look normal. But then in 1972, a person by the name of Amadeo Bobbio managed to do an X-ray of this mandible, and he discovered that the bone has healed over the ivory. That was the first evidence of osseointegration technology. From there onward, the technology has evolved to perform tooth implant, and dentists, with my admission, are way ahead of doctors and surgeons all the time. They're always ahead of us. They invented cement, they invented implants, they invented a lot of things that we follow many years later. So we took the technology and developed it to be used for amputees, basically. And these are images of several of my patients that I 3D modeled implants for based on their anatomy to fit their residual limb and utilize whatever they have in order for them to be able to mobilize again. And that's what is the end result. You can see these are extreme kind of cases where you can see on the right-hand side is Darren, who's lost both limbs above the knee, and if he's wearing long pants, you won't be able to identify that he's an above-knee amputee. And Stephen on the other side is using biome legs, and he walks almost normal, basically, with both prostheses. And the whole idea is to give people the ability to mobilize again. And I dare to say that now for an above-knee amputee, this technology bring their mobility back, and for a below-knee amputee, this technology give them their leg back, basically. And people are running, doing all sorts of activities. These kind of activities, such as rowing, such as speed cycling, cannot be done with a socket prosthesis because the socket falls. And my patients go to the extreme where they attach their prosthesis to flaps and things like that, and use it for diving. What we discovered with this technology is that people regain the ability to feel the ground, and they can feel what they're walking on, and there is no excuse anymore of stepping on your partner's toes. Then human beings get bored with things, so I'm a person that get bored after 10 minutes, so I started thinking about doing something else, and a more challenging avenue, which is this time growing limbs, people who have no limbs or very short limbs. So we designed this kind of technique by inserting a magnetic rods that expand, and this is an example of a patient where has a very short femur, and we grew a leg for her, basically. And you can see with the challenges that she had, both legs amputated, she has a leg now that she can walk with, and that's her, seeing her yesterday here in Perth, basically walking unaided and giving her mobility back, basically. This is the most challenging case that I faced, which is a 21-year-old young girl who had hardly any bone left in her hip. And as you can see how small it is, so I came up with this idea where I cut the bone between the lesser and the greater trochanter, and then made a hole in it, and then hook it up to an expandable device, and then hook it up with some plates and screws and cables, and then sign it so nobody can steal the idea. And then and then there you go, with the help of a few prayers from people that have connection with God, it did work. As you can see here, there's a lot of bone that grew, and this lady developed a leg, basically. And sorry, that was back. And that was her first steps ever in her life. She lost her limb at the age of 1. Basically. And then that became boring as well, and we moved to a new technology now. And now we're thinking about upper limb people who have no arms. So I'm not an inventor of this technology, but I'm one of the people that are using this technology, and it's called target muscle reinnervation. And now what we're thinking is that we have robotic arms, and we make the brain control it, basically. So we rejig the nerves that have been cut with the amputation, and move them back to muscles that are not utilized anymore, and they make them amplifiers, and then we hook them up with electrodes, and that connects to the robotic arm, basically. And with time, the brain start thinking that these muscles are the robotic arm, and the patients start thinking that they have an arm back again. And this is an extreme example. You can see this young chap is an Iraqi soldier who lost his limb fighting ISIS. And you wouldn't believe it if I tell you that this is half an hour after he was fitted with this arm for the first time ever. And that's in Baghdad, basically. So the whole idea is to pass this technology to people who need it at most, people who cannot afford it, basically, in areas where there are a lot of wars. And look at how excited he is trying to use his arm. That's the next day, basically, and he learned very quickly. So that takes us to another level where facing challenging cases with ethics. What we do is really outside the box, and it's really cutting-edge technology. So that creates a lot of problems. First, problems happens with peer. People who do not want to move and do want to push the boundaries and think that technologies should have stopped in the 18th century. And they would be the first people to write letters to the Department of Health and telling them that I should be deregistered. So this is an example. This is a 75-year-old gentleman who is diabetic, and he's a vascular patient. He's past retirement, and he had a blocked artery in his leg, and the vascular surgeon who did the amputation on him below the knee couldn't salvage the leg, obviously, and when he amputated, the flap died as well. So he called me and he said, what am I going to do with this patient? Because this patient will lose the rest of his leg. So I said, well, let's do osseointegration surgery for him. And it was a challenging case because that's way stretching it there. So we did osseointegration. You can see this picture over here. That's a piece of bone sticking out 3.5 years down the track. And this patient, every time he go to his prosthetist, there is a visually impaired patient always with a minding dog, and the dog always tried to bite this bone, basically. But you can see this gentleman has his life back. Now, what we're doing is against nature. What we're doing is against a lot of things. One of them, this gentleman, we are extending the life expectancy of these people, and the statistics shows that vascular patients' life expectancy is 12 months. 50% of them pass away after 12 months. So, so that there is an ethical question here of should we start doing these cases or and give these people their life back or not. Then you get to a different level. Again, there is something called conversion disorder, and I see patients that come to me with their limb not moving, not working at all, and then objectively we do the assessment on them, and we put them through the psychological tests with psychologists assessing them, pain specialists assessing them, and multiple clinicians, and we find nothing wrong with them. So, but they do believe that their limb is gone and it's not functioning. So what do we do? Do we provide them the amputation or do we not? If you do provide them the amputation, you're doing something, you're amputating a limb that's normal, basically, but it's not functioning because the person doesn't believe it's functioning. If you don't provide them the amputation and they go out and then kill themselves, then who's responsible? So that's a really challenging question. I still haven't got the answer for it, but obviously I know what my peer thinks about it. But it's who are we to judge these patients, and who are we to decide for them? And then when you take it a step further, this is from the movie, where the person does not get the medical help, but then they go and do it themselves, and then they come to you. And I had patients who did that. They couldn't be provided with the medical help, so they went and had a patient that went and had a circular saw and he amputated his limb and filmed it, and then he came and he said, well, I want help now. Then what's the answer to that? So, and then you take it a step further. It doesn't get that easy, does it? And then you face this kind of condition, okay? And when it becomes a child, okay? And you know, I'll move away from the picture because it's really sad. So this young kid, she's 4.5, she had meningococcemia, and I know factually that if I give her a robotic arm, she will grow normal because the robotic arm will be integrated with her completely. But who am I to make a decision for her? The family is divided, half wanted, half doesn't. The medical fraternity is strongly against it. And we don't know, are we doing her harm by not doing anything, or are we doing her a favor by letting her grow with an amputation? Thank you very much. That's it, then.
Munjed, thank you. I thought they were going to be graphic, but wow. I want you to take us back to when you, after you came to Australia and were released, and started to pursue, firstly orthopaedics, but then when you went into, because you're one of very, very few practitioners of osseointegration in the world, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully this will grow bigger, but there are not many osseointegration surgeons in the world.
So, and you learned it in Germany?
Yeah, so after I finished my training here in Australia, went and pursued my dream to achieve that, and Germany is the land where all technologies starts and develops. So it is a German technology, and I went and learned it there. Then I came back and started it here. Started it here under the radar, to be honest, at the beginning. But then, I mean, it's so funny, or not in a funny way, but when I first did it, people laughed at me. And then when I did the first 10, I presented them in a national meeting, and then all of a sudden I got faced with many letters written by so many people about how horrible this is, and I'm going to destroy a lot of people's lives. And then when we provided the evidence and proved that it does work, then the fight increased and escalated. And then when we passed the hundreds, then we started getting acknowledged, and now people are coming to learn it, which is sad.
What's given you the conviction then to be practically the sole practitioner in Australia, and to find a team that will work with you and to carry on this work when you don't feel you've got the support of peers?
Well, the problem is, I mean, I do believe in this technology, and I do believe in helping people, and I don't practice defensive medicine because that's the wrong way of doing things. And the way I see how a lot of practitioners conducting themselves, and I'm very outspoken about this as well, as you can tell. It is very sad because that's kind of losing the whole essence of being a medical practitioner. The whole idea, the whole ethos of medicine is to help people, and it's all built on trust, built on having faith in the fraternity, and the last thing we should do is that we treat patients as they are the enemy, and act in the fear of being sued. We are a very litigious society, and that's the whole West is the same. But I think it's very important that we keep medicine separated from that. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I do believe in what I do, and I do enjoy it. And otherwise, life is boring doing hip and knee replacement surgery.
So how do you determine who is a candidate for this kind of surgery?
Well, there is a very extensive process for this kind of surgery. We still, I'm not that mad, we still have, I mean, the best way of practicing anything in life is to be surrounded by knowledgeable people that are expert in the field, and share the opinions and the ideas. And I was very lucky that I managed to convince few elite practitioners in the field that this technology does make sense, and then they joined, and now we have a massive cohort of people that run this center basically, and it's growing bigger to become a unique center in the world basically, which is expanding to limb reconstruction. And it doesn't exist anywhere else. I mean, definitely doesn't exist in Australia. There are similar smaller models in the UK and in Sweden, but I think we'll be the world leaders in that field, where we have multiple clinicians that sit together and interview the patient, and the patient have different levels. Number one is a peer-to-peer assessment. Number two, where the patient get to see other patients who have this, and now with social media, it's all over the place. You know, all you need to do is Google something, and then everything pops out. And it's not very hard to communicate with people who have similar conditions, and information is very accessible. And that's, some people see that as danger. I see that as a huge advantage, because empowering people with knowledge and information make our life a lot easier, because knowledge is all about it's all about how you make this process successful for the patient, and the best way to make it successful is by empowering the receiving person of this technology. And I can give you an example. I'm sorry, I moved away from your question, but I remember one day in my early childhood in medicine. Sorry, I was a junior doctor. Okay, I was just about to perform surgery, like a broken hip on a patient, and the patient was lying down, an elderly lady, very fragile, and her daughter was beside her, and the daughter said to me, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I explained to her what I was going to do, and she said, "Well, I'm going to go and research that on the net." And I said, "Yeah, by all means, spend that time research and then come back and ask me." And the anaesthetist was from a different generation. She said, "No, that's rubbish. You should not research anything, and you should just listen to us, because you'll fill your brain with all confusing information and you will not know what to do." And I totally disagree with that, because we cannot disregard people, and there is no one smarter than the other. And it doesn't mean that I have learned a few Latin words in medicine that I know more than a lot of people. And I learn a lot from my patients normally. So we have to understand that. And I'm a strong believer that knowledge is the answer to everything.
So the decisions are made in a collaborative process with the patient and with their family members?
Well, ultimately the decision is made by the patient. We are here to serve the patient, and there's no way around that. It has to be that way. And we are a service provider, and I always say it, like, I'm here to serve people. I'm not here to tell them what to do. Ultimately, if they want to do it, it's their decision, and all I can do is to help them to achieve that decision. I'm not, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the future holds, but I know that the odds are, you know, in certain conditions we will achieve success. In other conditions we will fail. And I see patients, and I hate to turn patient down, but like 2 days ago I was running a clinic in Sydney, and I had a patient who was who was very keen on having a solution for his problem, and he was like very passionate about having something done. And I said, "Look, I'm sorry, if I touch you with this kind of procedure, you will end up dying, and it's not going to work."
I'm curious about that, in the sense that, you know, there is this whole process that you go through to have determined that a person is a candidate. But what are some of the things that we might not think about that you have to warn them about in terms of what it will be like to live with a robotic limb?
Well, look, I mean, funny enough, one of the simplest things that people don't come across is that is this going to be sharp? I'm going to live with a piece of metal sticking out of my leg all my life. Is this going to tear sheets? Am I going to have normal intimal relationship with that? I mean, these are the things that are very simple, but they are very important. And because after all, it's all about practical day-to-day life. And we go to these kind of details at that level. And that's where we use peer to peer consultation, because there are patients who have been through this and they know it more than us, and that's where we learned and build the information that we have at the moment, and thanks to the experience that we had with other people, basically. And we're still learning. Life is all about learning.
Do they need to be replaced?
Well, look, theoretically speaking, no, because there is no mobile parts inside. The internal part doesn't need to be replaced, but the component externally and the connections, they have life expectancy. It's like anything. You replace a car, you replace a TV, you replace anything mechanical, and they do fail with time, but they are designed to be replaceable. But the implantable part, in theory, should last a lifetime, unless it get rusted with an infection or get hit by a car and break.
So at the moment, you're working on upper limbs and lower limbs, but what's the potential? Because I heard you in the earlier session talking about having an eye external to the body, and that was somewhat in progress.
I mean, this is outside my field, but ultimately, and in the future, we may get to a stage where a lot of our parts will be replaced by computerized technology. And if you see Futurama, we may end up with a brain only and running everything. I don't know how much fun that would be, but we do have the capacity now, and unfortunately, disasters and wars create innovations, and I know certain countries are already inserting chips in people's brains to allow them to use wider field of vision and more range of waves, so they can see in dark. So that's happening already. And again, the technology that I'm using now, sadly, thankful to the wars, we can achieve it because governments fund wars, fund destruction tools, and they spend a small percentage on the disasters after that. And that small percentage is an enormous amount of money that can fund these kind of innovative work. I mean, it is very sad because, you know, with the price of one Pershing weapon, one Pershing missile, or one Abraham tank, you can build a hospital, basically.
I watched the Foreign Correspondent episode that you recorded at the end of last year, was it, with Sophie McNeil, where you went into Iraq and I think performed something like 50 surgeries over 5 days, something...
Yeah, I mean, now the number stands at 322, and so we went back again and again, but politics started getting in, and now I'm torn apart. I just received a phone call from the Iraqis, and one faction tells me that you're not allowed to work in the other hospital, and the other faction is telling me you're not allowed to work in the other hospital. And I said, what are the repercussions? He said, you don't want to know. But anyway, I mean, Iraq is a shithole, and it's going through another disaster time, and I'm sorry, I'm very politically incorrect, but you know, there are riots outside and people burning stuff, but we have to go there and do something, because otherwise what will happen? So on average, when we go there, we operate between 10 and 16 cases a day. So I try to go there every 3 months for a week. And surprisingly, I have a lot of volunteers, people who are very keen on going and not thinking of what could happen. But it is dangerous.
And it's a funny question to ask, but I had pondered how much more life-changing an osseointegration procedure would be for an Iraqi who has been through, you know, who's been damaged by the war, unable to work and all. I mean, there was a huge amount of anguish in watching that foreign correspondent, as opposed to someone in Australia who has the support of the health system?
Well, that's the whole idea. I mean, my dream is to provide this technology to people who need it at most, people who cannot afford it. People like in Cambodia and Myanmar, in Laos, in Iraq, for a simple reason, because people over there, this technology, though it may sound very fancy, but it's very simple, and ultimately we can dumb it down to very, very simple level, where I hope that by next 10 years it will become less than $2,000 technology, where tens of thousands of people can benefit from it, and it does work. If it works, it works perfectly well. And places like these areas, resurfacing is very difficult. Like, we did a pilot study in Cambodia, and it's amazing how when we went to this hospital, I mean, Iraq is a bit different because Iraq, it's in the middle. Iraq is very similar to the United States of America. Not so retarded, not so good, but it's the same level. But Cambodia is a struggling nation where there is nothing, basically. So we went to this hospital. It's called the Children's Hospital, and there was nothing, basically nothing. And then I discovered that next door they have Angelina Jolie came in and volunteered a workshop to make silicons and sockets. So we had the implants that we brought with us from Australia, but then we didn't have any legs to hook them up with. So we went to the shop next door, and they make door hinges, and then we managed to find some aluminium pipes, and with Angelina Jolie's feet, we managed to make a leg, basically. And that was an amazing prosthetic limb for these people. And comparing to what they had before, they're all rice farmers. They're all submerged in muddy waters. And with the traditional socket prosthesis, they cannot work. While with this technology, that gives them the ability to function way superior with a door hinge, basically. So you can do that.
And that limb would have a decent amount of longevity as well?
Well, you can replace a door hinge, very easy.
Not by yourself. Have to wait for Dr. Munjed to come back.
No, but funny enough, we had, and it was an amazing experience, because we had some prosthetic students from Ballarat University who were sitting there, and I came to them, and it's funny, I said, well, we're doing this, can you help us? And made some drawings, and then we came up with this idea, and it worked. And then, after that, you can see the bureaucracy. We went to the prosthetic center in Phnom Penh, and the guy who was sitting there, who was in charge, is a British person, and he looked at us and he said, and we said, okay, we've done these patients, we just want you to follow them up. And he said, well, we don't accept that. And I said, why? He said, we need state-of-art, brand new technology. I had some legs with me to donate, and he said, are these used? And I said, yes, they are used. And he said, well, I don't accept used legs. We need brand new legs. And I said, you're an idiot. I used legs in Sydney, for God's sake. But that's when you hit the roadblock with bureaucrats and government authorities. That's what you face. Their arrogance and I face the same problem in Iraq. The Iraqis have the same issue. Once it hits government, then everything turned to pear-shaped.
How challenging is it for you personally to be returning to Iraq on a fairly regular basis? Yeah,
look, it's madness, because you don't know what will happen and who would turn against you. I mean, I try to keep my mouth shut, but I never do. I confronted the previous Prime Minister the other day in my last visit, and I had a big go at him because he walked out. He was in the hospital, and I said to him, well, I have all these people that need legs, and you the government authorized $3.5 million to buy legs for them. And the Ministry of Health took the money, and he said, well, no, this is not my problem. And I said, what are you talking about? You are the Prime Minister. These people lost their limbs because of you, fighting for you. And then people tried to kill him, basically. So he has a big army. So I don't know, maybe next time we go there, there might be someone waiting for us.
But do you feel like that, genuinely?
Not really. I mean, you live only once. Life is too short to think about these things. And you know, if you die tomorrow, then someone else will come and do something better. I mean, look, if you go to Woolies, you may be hit by a car. So, so the odds are
I
there
like
all
your
the time.
chances at Woolies better, personally. Tell me a little bit about what you think the propensity is for misuse of robotics, and in terms of, you know, where that's going in the medical field and how it might be used in a wrong way.
Look, I'm in the business of giving people their mobility back and bringing people as close as possible to physical normality. I'm not in the business of enhancement. However, enhancement will happen, and it is happening in many fields. And there are people who are utilizing technology to improve themselves beyond. I mean, that has side effects and has disadvantages, and it's been going on with athletes for many years now, and we will see it. And it's not dissimilar to cosmetic surgery. It's not dissimilar to a lot of practices that people do. People want to be perfect in the way they look. They want to look perfect. They want to act perfect, and they want to, you know, break a lot of records.
Do you think that our concept of what perfect is will change because we have access to this kind of technology?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like anything with life. It's like any kind of technology. Technology is moving very fast, so I don't know what the future holds, but definitely people tend not to accept what they have, and they always want something better. And that's a human nature. But this is not my field.
Yeah. You talked about how some of your peers wanted to slow down the process, to kind of just to pull it back a little bit. What did you mean by that exactly?
Well, look, I mean, in my previous panel talk, I mentioned that medicine is very, very conservative. Australian medical practitioners are very conservative, and they practice safe. But then there is a question about where is safe, and sometimes it's not always a good thing to like. Sometimes surgery is the answer, and sometimes surgery is a must. And people should be accountable for not choosing the right decision for the patient, because the patient put their faith in the clinician that's providing them the service. We learn in medical school is always use conservative approach, and then you go to more invasive approach. And traditionally it's been thought that the invasive approach is using a knife and cutting. That need to change, because in many aspects, surgery can be the conservative approach. And it's all relative, and it's all interchangeable based on the circumstances. But there is the overall, like in my day-to-day work with hip and knee surgery, I get patients who are getting to 80-year-old with brittled with arthritis, can hardly walk, their heart has given up, their kidneys have given up, their lungs are not functioning well, because they've been to doctors and surgeons who told them, I don't want to see you until you're crawling. And that's the wrong approach, because you need to give the advice for the person based on the person, rather than a blanket rule that you need to avoid surgery until you can't put up with the pain. Because what's the benefit of doing a knee replacement on an 85-year-old that has not much to live, and they struggled with arthritis for 30 years? I mean, that's wrong. That's not giving them the right approach and the right decision. But you hear that all the time, and it's a generation thing, and people can be less progressive than others, and So that's why when we're talking about something way outside the box like osseointegration surgery, this is a blasphemy. And there are many examples of people being held on a stake and burned because of blasphemy.
You were citing an example of a diabetic patient in your presentation, and I wondered whether there is any kind of undertaking.
This particular patient, the clinician who looked after him said the words that this is madness.
Right.
Okay.
But is there any requirement?
4 years later, madness still alive.
Yeah, still alive, still diabetic?
Still vascular, still functioning.
So there's no undertaking required from the patient to say, I will make any lifestyle changes to maintain my health so that I'm, that I get 10 years out of this or anything like that.
No, but statistically speaking, this person would be dead.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but that was when we decided to do the case. I'll tell you the story about this patient. Actually, it's very interesting. So he's a lovely guy, and I walked to the room. He's suing the hospital that missed the popliteal artery aneurysm. So he's already taking legal action. His son was standing there, who's a lawyer. His other daughter, she was an ABC reporter, and the other daughter was a doctor. And I walked in, and then I told my prosthetist, we're going to do this, and that was the first case ever to be done in the world. That's worldwide, okay? And the prosthetist says, I'm not doing that. And then I got to a stage where I had to come to the patient, and the patient said, look, I want it done, and I'm happy to sign a clearance that I would never sue the prosthetist, and I'll sign one for you. And I said, no, mate, don't worry. I'm not worried about that because it doesn't wash anyway. So, but this kind of patient that I had to face in the first case in the world of its kind. And then we published the results of these patients. But again, they had, obviously, because they're a very intelligent family, they had an opinion from another person who said this is madness, and then we ended up doing it.
And doing it anyway. I think this is an appropriate time for me to ask the question about courage, because I think as a surgeon, and maybe you take it for granted now, but it always fascinates me that the amount of courage and confidence that you need to have going into your daily work, and probably particularly where it's groundbreaking daily work. Is it something that you contemplate even?
Well, look, it's, don't get me wrong, I had so many sweaty nights and sweaty pillows, and I used to sleep with one eye open all the time because, you never know when you get the next stab. But life is all about, leaving something behind and doing your best for people if you believe in it. I'm not mad. I practice medicine as safe as I can practice, and life is all about risk. But as long as it's a calculated risk, and as long as you're measured, then you can push the wheel of evolution further. And I've never chosen to have an easy life because this doesn't have any money or anything in it, and it's very risky. And I still, I talk about the wheel of fortune, and one day you're on top, the other day you're at the bottom. And people always say, well, you're now on the top. And I said, for the moment, because you never know what will happen. Because, if I make a mistake or have an error of judgment and things go wrong, I might lose everything. But I do it because I believe in it. I do it because I know that I can make people's life better, and I'll continue to do it. And I hope that there will be many people who would do the same.
So when you speak about errors of judgment then, and I'm sure all surgeons must feel at some point in their practice that they've made those, is it something that you allow much time for reflection on, or do you understand that that's a part of the role?
Look, we are human beings. The ultimate case would be a computer treating a computer. Nothing will go wrong, okay? If a computer is treating a human being, that's less chance of error. If a human being treating a human being, many things can go wrong, okay? But what I've learned with life, if you do your best to make the right decision, and if things go wrong and you make a mistake, you admit it, and you say, I'm sorry, and you promise that you'll fix it. And patients do forgive.
What do you think that you learned, or how I guess you were changed by your experience in coming to Australia and being in detention? How do you think that changed you fundamentally as a person?
Well, look, I was a spoiled brat in Iraq. I was living in a bubble. I was completely insular. I was a different person, and I think I'm very grateful for Philip Roddock and the Department of Immigration that took me through all this hardship. It did make me who I am. But you know, the way you grow up and the way you raise your kids is very important. I always was told that look at the brighter side of things, look at the glass half full, never look at the glass half empty, because life is too short and you live only once. And you better make use of it and leave something for yourself, leave something for your family, and what's more important, leave something for the community. And I think...
Is that what you said to yourself when you were in detention and didn't know how long you were going to be there for?
Yeah, I mean, I had very tough times and I had very low times, and when I was in that box for 40 days, and every day I ask, what am I doing here? They say, we're rehabilitating you. I was wondering when I would leave, or would I ever leave? And every day they come to me and they say, if you decide to leave, we will help you to go back. And I said, well, I have nowhere to go, and I'm here, I'm staying here. And I had a book on me, and I kept reading the book from cover to cover, and which was Last Anatomy. And thanks again to the Department of Immigration, I scored very high in anatomy. So.
So, I mean, having had that experience and then being able to come to Australia, qualify, you know, as an orthopaedic surgeon, why is it that you sought these new frontiers as opposed to, I mean, you'd be forgiven for wanting a quiet life?
Look, it would be very boring, to be honest. But hey, don't get me wrong. I'm extremely grateful. Australia is home. Sydney is home. I'm sorry. I like Perth. I would never live in Melbourne. But sorry, I know you're from Melbourne.
No, I'm from here.
Oh, sorry, you're from here. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, and I'm extremely grateful to Australia, and I'm very proud to be Australian, and the way I was brought up is that I have to give back, and that's why I have to give back. And it is, I mean, people think about Middle Eastern people and these scumbags that are coming on boats, but believe me, there are a lot of good things about the way some people are brought up. And I was in a career seeker event, and an Afghani young boy stood up and he said something very nice. He said, the way I was brought up is that work is an honor, and I have to find a job, because if I don't have a job, that means I don't have an honor. And that's how we were raised up, basically. So it is important. And look, bottom line, we all have different colors and different looks, and brought up to different ethnic backgrounds and different faiths, but we share the same blood.
Just going back to the technology itself, does it change, adapt much? Is it something that you have to keep on top of all the time?
Yeah, I mean, the design that I had 10 years ago is completely the design that I have at the moment, and it's like anything. We continue to improve, and there's a lot of investment. I mean, again, I believe in this, and that's why I still work doing hip and knees surgeries and joints, so I can fund this project, because I fund it from my own pocket, and I'll continue to fund it. So because we need to build it further and further, and hey, now it's bringing its fruits. Actually, funny enough, from a hobby and a passion about making the Terminator as a child, now I have the technology there. The German technology, we ended up buying the technology from Germany, and now we are exporting to Germany and 19 other countries. So we are exporting now this technology to the rest of the world, and we became the world leaders in this technology. I'm very proud about this, and I encourage that Australia invest in humans, and because we should not keep thinking about what's under our ground, because that will not last. And you know, it's expanding and it's getting bigger, and now it's making money, basically.
And are surgeons now coming to you asking to be trained in this process?
Yeah, I mean, there is no week that passes that I'm much well known outside Australia than in Australia, but the Prophet is never known in his own town. But that's a normal thing. That's a very normal thing. But now we're getting acknowledgement, and we have local surgeons. Still, there is a lot of skeptics, and as I said to you, one of my peer went to the extent that. That says, oh, you know, is it true that in Iraq people cut ears? I mean, that's how stupid people can
that they would want to discredit your reason.
And that's the sad thing. Some people just hit below the belt line all the time. Yeah.
I feel like I'd love to offer the audience the opportunity to ask questions. Has anyone got a question? Yes. Just, is there a roving mic?
Oh, I think I've got a loud voice.
Okay, it's for the recording, so just 1 second if you wouldn't mind, please. Thank you.
Just want to say that you're a remarkable human being. Having worked in the health system as a registered nurse for 35 years, we need more doctors like you.
Thank you.
Keep it up.
Thank you.
And having worked in orthopaedics and nursed many people with like amputees, and you know, with the pressure sores that they get and getting used to it, and the phantom. What I want to ask you is about the phantom pain. Do they still get the phantom pain?
Yeah, I mean, that's another. Now we developed a new technology. Not me, but it's been developed in Austria, and now it's taken. Well, we took it, and the Americans took it, and the Americans now are making American technology as usual, like with anything else. So we now rejig the nerves to give them something to do, and there is promising results with that to treat phantom limb pain as well.
I had my first baby in '62 when thalidomide was being given for morning sickness, and lucky for me, I wouldn't take anything. Have you had the opportunity, or are you, because those people now are in their 60s, 50s, 60s, that, you know, it was terrible to watch them living without limbs. Were you able to help any of those people?
Well, we managed to treat few congenital amputees, not particularly thalidomide patients. I haven't treated a thalidomide patient yet. I have an equivalent case in Iraq that I'm going to treat, a child, 9-year-old girl. But we've treated several congenital amputees who are similar, a similar situation. Yep.
Another question? Oh, yes, sorry, I'm going to send you running all the way to the back on the far side now, please. Thank you so much. I didn't realise that you'd actually been in clinic. You have a clinic in Perth as well, obviously. That was.
Yeah, I do come because I have a lot of patients from Perth.
For robotics?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anyone in the audience?
Some people here in the audience.
May I?
Glad I asked.
May I applaud you on a wonderful man that you are. You're absolutely brilliant.
Thank you,
I
sir.
watched the Same Correspondence program on TV, and that was amazing. So my question to you is, have you ever heard of Noel, the super vet?
Yes, Noel Fitzpatrick.
Yeah.
I had dinner with him just like a few months ago. He's a big womanizer. He was hitting on my girlfriend.
Okay.
So
in a one-on-one interview, Noel said that his dying wish would be for human surgeons, as he put it,
to learn
to
from
use his technology.
Absolutely.
Do you agree?
Yes, I totally agree. I mean, I've known Noel for many years, and I'll tell you a story about Noel. He was invited by Her Majesty to have dinner with her, and he broke his ankle just during the period. So he went through making the suit and everything, and to fit his cast. And then when he sat, he was the only human being that head-butted the Queen. machine. So when they sat on the dinner table, as he sat, he kicked her bag, and she went trying to grab it, and he went to grab it, and they had hit together. That's Noel Fitzpatrick.
Are you prepared to have a chat with us? Would you mind just bringing the microphone over to this gentleman who's a patient of Dr. Munjeds, please?
Thank you.
Hello. What's your name?
My name's Jolyon.
And Jolyon, tell me about your relationship with Dr. Munjed.
So I had heard about osseointegration and started doing the usual internet research on it and was a bit nervous. I'd been an amputee for over 30 years. So I was very familiar with sockets and that kind of technology and what the limits were and what I could do. And then as a below-knee amputee, it's harder in some ways to get a good result from osseointegration, just because of the shape of the bones. And so I did a lot of reading and a lot of research and finally met Munjed and decided, what the hell, have a go.
How's it gone?
It's been less than a year and the results are frighteningly good.
And immediate? Is it an immediate kind of response?
You've got a long recovery period where you're walking with crutches and just gradually building up your strength and ability to walk as the bone and the titanium integrate. So it's a slow process.
I remember you saying that it's better, you get a better result from above knee amputation, don't you? Yeah.
No.
Oh.
No. Actually, from an above knee, you give them their mobility back. From below knee, you give them their leg back. Is that right?
Yep.
Yes. Yeah.
So if below knee works, it's absolutely superior to anything else. So what Jolyon's saying is that the rehabilitation, we have very strict rehabilitation protocol because with below knee, below the knee, the tibia is pyramidal shape and it's a reverse pyramid. While the implant, you have to put it from the bottom. So it's very challenging to decide the size and the shape and the technology of the implant. And because I'm the only one who's doing below knee amputees in the world, so I don't have anyone to learn from, basically. Well, above knee, the technology has been there for a while, and we learned from the Germans, and we learned from their mistakes, but from below the knee, we started it, basically. We are much more cautious with it. But definitely, once it works, it's brilliant.
So you're glad you went ahead then, Jolyon?
So far, so
Yeah.
absolutely brilliant.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Do you have any further questions? Eva, oh yes. No. Gentleman up the front here, please, and then we have another lady on the front as well. Oh, they're thick and fast now. We have 3 minutes to go.
Dr. Munjed, you mentioned just now that you had to fund this work yourself. I'm just curious, aren't there any grants from the government to fund something that's so, cutting edge?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, actually. We are applying now for grants. Funny enough, we have 7 million euros grant from the European Union. We have $4 million US dollars from the Department of Defense from America. And finally, we have a grant, an RCT grant from the Australian government of $4 million to build a centre. But there is a lot of red tape and there are a lot of things that goes around grant. I'm trying to build a manufacturing facility because we still outsource the manufacturing in Australia, and I was told that I should go to Brisbane. It's much easier, or Adelaide, because New South Wales government is much more restricted, basically. So there's a lot of politics here.
There's another question in the oh, you're here now. Sorry, won't be a moment.
Hello, sorry you can't see me, but I have 2 questions. I'll be fast. One is, how much will it cost to do anything like this, and will the Medicare kind of pay for it if it's the right decision? And the second one is, what's the hardest thing of this procedure? Is it like I guess your body rejects the implant, or is it more about the technology, or just how to implant it?
Yeah, look, there is MBS code and there is Medicare rebate for it. The external component, there are different bodies that supply it now. If NDIS offer a certain level of funding, and there are components that are not funded. But the implant is covered by Medicare, the external components covered by NDIS or your organization, depend on the state. And depends on what you want. For the external component, if you want a Rolls-Royce kind of robot, the government wouldn't fund it. But NDIS cover reasonable kind of components that is functional. So we are lucky to be in Australia with the technology that is a lot of it is funded and covered. If you come from overseas, definitely they have to pay. Majority of nearly 50% of my patients are international patients, and it costs them like $110,000. But Australians doesn't cost that much. It's much cheaper. Obviously, the surgical fees and other fees that are outside the funding, like anything else. Now, the hardest thing is the decision making. The implant is made out of titanium, and it's coated with nanoparticles. So, and there are some other technologies in it that are patented that I can't disclose, but there is no rejection of the body. There is a risk of infection, obviously, but that goes down as time goes by.
Thank you. And one final question in the front here.
My colleague has got a sore throat, so I'll be voicing for our client. Absolutely amazing. What an incredible job. Thank you for coming to Australia. I'm glad fate brought you here. I wanted to ask you, I'm very interested to know, with other doctors over in Europe, are they lining up to learn from you? Are you going to become a professor of medicine that you're doing? Or?
So I am a professor of medicine. With European doctors, so we have many centres now. We have 2 centres in the UK, or a third centre. A third centre is opening in Scotland. And we have 2 centres in Holland, we have 2 centres in Germany, Spain, Italy's opening up, and so there are many countries in Europe that are very interested in Turkey. We've done cases in Jordan, Lebanon, we've done 98 cases in Iraq, and even the Americans are getting it now. I've done 3 cases in New York in hospital of special surgery, and we've done cases in Canada as well. So I'm spending most of my time traveling around the world doing it, yeah, and teaching people.
And in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, in Australia we have more than 600 cases done. Yeah.
Thank you. Munjed, the theme of the entire Disrupted 2018 has been about the melding of humanity and technology, and I think you very ably brought us to a very inspiring conclusion today. Thank you for being here. Please thank Professor Munjed al Muderis.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. And thanks to you, Meri, Fatin, as well. Thank you very much. Big round of applause for our guests today. Look, that brings us to the end of Disrupted Festival 2018. I want to thank you all so much for coming along. I've got a few quick thank yous to go. If you want to leave, you can go. That's all right. Just so you're not left there on the stage. Big round of applause once again. Before you all rush off, I'd just like to have a few thank yous just to the people that have put this whole festival together. First of all, our Auslan interpreters who have been here all weekend. They've done every session and signed some very strange words along the way. So they've done a fantastic job. Big thank you also to the State Library of Western Australia who have put the whole event together. All of our speakers and panellists, of course, who have come along and spoken to you all over the last couple of days. I want to say a big thank you to all the crew that have done all the sound and the video and all the things that are here today that enable us to go and watch videos and be heard and all those sort of things. There's a whole bunch of volunteers as well that have donated their time to help the people throughout the library. Big thanks to GM Consulting, so Georgia and Rachel and Jess and all the team there who have put all the program together and done all that sort of stuff. And also I want to say a big thank you to all of you for coming along as well, because if we don't have audience come along to these kind of events and support the library and support these kind of things, then they just won't happen anymore. So thank you all so much for coming along, and hopefully we'll see you again next year. Don't forget you can have a look at the live stream, which is available for the next few days on the website. So make sure you check that out and you might be able to see yourself. And you can also pass it on to people who may not have been here and be listening to some of the fantastic talks that we've had here today. So once again, thank you all so very, very much, and hopefully we'll see you again next year. Bye-bye.